when we look at the achievement gap, we have to look at it from historical nature when comparing Caucasians to minorities. When we look at the establishment of the United States back in 1776, from there about 230 about years of slavery, and at that time it was illegal for an African American to read or write. So when you think about those things that play into it, those all go into the historical nature of the achievement gap. So when you look at one culture where it was almost illegal for them to be educated, that's going to start then a systemic and a cultural issue on with the stigma with education. Then we have to look at it wasn't until 1954 where Brown versus Board of Education, where it was separate, where it voted for the end of segregation into schools. Then we still have to look at going into the 60s where Kennedy actually had to send the National Guard down to the University of, we looked at the University of Alabama, and then also Central High School in Little Rock for it to even be segregated. So when we look at all these things that go into historically that go into it, these all play into the fact of the achievement gap. So now we look at today. So we think about the great grandparents and maybe even grandparents, great grandparents of some of the kids that we're coming into now, where they're faced with those historical achievement gaps moving into today, where we're actually moving into maybe a foundation where at least some parents are being educated. What we're finding now are that our students are still coming in with some of those stigmas and some of those disparities in education, where a student who was Caucasian, where it was the achievement, the attainment for education was discussed from sometimes when they were little all the way through high school where they knew they were going to college. So when you look at it now, it's about 11% of children between age 6 and 18 live in a household where either parents earned a high school diploma. So when we break it down, there's over 51% of African Americans, 49% of Hispanics live below the poverty line. So when we look at these type of things and these barriers that are placed in to education, it hurts these students, and it's spreading into the achievement gap. We are moving into a point now where we're looking at in higher ed about for African Americans, we're looking at about African Americans. If you look at African American males, about 30% are going into graduating, or entering into higher education, in comparison to about 63% of Caucasians that actually move into a higher ed. We are seeing a growing number of Hispanics now at the increase in population is moving into higher education. So the gaps amongst minorities seem to be closing with Caucasian. But if we look at culturally with the African American group, they still stagnate and stay far from behind. So there needs to be a lot more program placed on college access, a lot more studies in higher ed, working with in K through 12, working with minorities and their families to understand the importance and attainments of higher education today.